know the tale of the girl who was sitting by the fire with her kitten. It's a story that was written long ago. You know that she was about to retire when the glass above the fire seemed to
Hey everyone, before we begin, I just wanted to let you know that today's video is going to be cut into two parts. Our footage from this review ended up totaling out to almost an hour, and cut down it's still almost a half an hour. I'm currently back in Ames, and the internet here is not going to be conducive to uploading a half-hour long video. I'm not even sure it's going to be up to uploading a 15-minute video. But I'm going to cut it in half anyway, see what happens. So this week we'll have part 1 of our review of the 1931 version of Alice in Wonderland, and next week we'll have part 2 of the review. Thanks for watching. Hey everyone, welcome back to Wonderland Wednesday. Today we're talking about the 1931 version of Alice in Wonderland. Actually, the first version with sound. The other versions before this all were silent. I think we're in agreement that this is our least favorite of all the ones we've watched. When it first started, I was like, this may not be half bad, because it started with a song that was like really catchy. I really liked it.
Historically interesting, clever, perky. It was Irving Berlin, and I'm wondering how he felt about, like, oh my goodness, they have my song. I have now seen what they have done. I had seen a tiny clip of this version, just a little bit of footage of this version, and I knew it wasn't going to be amazing, but this was... This was amazingly bad.
Yeah.
We were amazed.
So after the song, we have a really long extended sequence of her sitting on the ground. I think the song was basically put there to explain how she got to Wonderland, because when it opens, she's already in Wonderland.
She was just looking around, and then finally she starts into the dialogue, and they could have gotten to that way sooner than they did. It was ridiculous. Once she does start talking, she started to give me the impression that she had been nipping at the bathtub gin. Too much.
A lot of people in this film had a very odd way of talking, and I'm wondering if nobody learned their lines, because most people looked like they were looking off camera, perhaps reading cue cards.
Not all of them, but Alice
especially. She was the worst one.
It was really pronounced, because she's trying to be really perky and animated, and yet staring off into the distance. Like,
yeah,
okay,
it was just really odd. I liked some of her line delivery, but the fact that she was staring off into space with a sort of vacant look on her face,
it was all wrong.
It gave it a really weird feeling.
And one of the things that I kind of went on about was I was confused what they were trying to communicate more with her, because she's in this sort of little flapper length dress, but yet she's in full makeup, and she's talking in this sort of childlike, innocent way. It's like, are you trying to communicate adult or child here? You're not succeeding properly at either.
So after her excruciatingly long monologue, she's interrupted by the White Rabbit, who is probably something that could be described
his
as
favorite
stuff of
character.
Nightmares. This was literally the worst White Rabbit costume I have ever seen.
It was
hideous.
I wasn't really bothered by the rabbit, but we each had our things.
To me, this rabbit sort of looked like, if you've ever watched Adventure Time, it looked like one of the sea lards. I'll try and put a picture in here for you so you can compare, but it looked sort of like that, and I'm wondering if maybe they were inspired by this. The resemblance to me was uncanny.
She gets a hold of his fan and gloves for just a little bit, and then tosses them back at him, and she never goes to his house. And then they do this weird, I don't know if corny's the right word, it's like they're stretching and shrinking the screen, and it's like they were trying to portray her size changing, but the mushrooms are right there with her.
And they're stretching as well. And there was nothing in the script to indicate that that's what was going on. It was just like somebody was trying out a special effect and it wasn't working, but they put it in the film anyway. After that, she goes to the Duchess's house, and it does not look like a house where a duchess would live, because it's like a little farmhouse with a wooden gate.
Unpainted, looked like an unpainted picket fence goes into a regular house. The Duchess and the cook weren't bad costume-wise. We've seen...
They were probably the best costumes we've seen. Well, some of the best costumes we've seen.
I mean, they had the Duchess in large headgear, and they pretty much just put something on their noses to make their noses look funky.
I thought they made the noses look sort of like a pig, sort of foreshadowing the pig transformation.
Maybe that's what they... I didn't think that deeply on it. Congratulations. This was one of the most bizarre, unexpected things in this film. I have never seen this, and it was like a horror film. Like,
truly like a horror film.
Okay, so first, the Duchess scares off the cook. She's fed up with the cook's pepper, and she's explaining about how the pepper disturbs the baby, and she does a poorly sung song. I mean, she did sing it, but nobody was in opera on this. Trust me, nobody was in opera on this version. Otherwise, they were hiding their light under a bushel.
There were plenty of songs in this version, but the only one worth listening to was the one at the very beginning.
The baby pig transformation was done differently. It was all done in the kitchen. The pig runs off, like, out of the kitchen. Then Alice is talking about how it makes a rather handsome pig, and, you know, maybe wouldn't have been the best looking baby, or...
Most of the dialogue is the same as what it was in the book, except she's speaking to the Duchess instead of to herself.
Right. And I think what they were trying to communicate next was that the Duchess was offended by this comment?
I don't really know. They were talking about the Queen and how the Queen beheads people.
Okay, so this was the bizarre part. The Duchess gets up, goes over into another area of the kitchen, picks up an axe, and very slowly, emphasis, comes towards Alice with the axe, but they don't show it from a side angle. It's like she's coming at you with an axe. And then they switch over to Alice's face, and her hand is like on her throat, and she lets out a blood-curdling scream, and the Duchess chases her out of the house and is talking about, I think, how the Queen will behead her. I don't care if it's Wonderland. There is a line, people. You can be weird in Wonderland, but this is not okay.
This is not the kind of weird that you would expect from Wonderland.
It's supposed to be fun, weird.
Yeah.
Not psychotic killer, death, weird.
Alice leaves right after that, and then she's acting like nothing even happened. And she comes upon the Cheshire Cat.
It's the djinn. The Cheshire Cat was not in the kitchen scene at all.
No, but he talked like he was, because he asked her what became of the baby, like he knew what was going on. It was like they used dialogue from the book that didn't make any sense because this did not happen outside.
They were quite true to the book in this scene, but it was painful. And I don't mean literally painful, just that emotional pain when it's just embarrassing and it's taking too long.
This guy was such an over-actor, like trying to be a cat, like meowing every word. It just kept terrible.
He kept making cat noises in between his lines and fake laughing, and I mean, the costume wasn't great, but if he had been good, it would have been okay. If he had just been sitting there and calmly and just a little bit of silly, because the Cheshire Cat isn't over the top.
No, he's supposed to be kind of understated crazy. But this one, I think I said, I never expected a Cheshire Cat that would make me think that the 1915 version was good. because compared to this one, the horrible cat from the 1915 version, I thought was great.
Was that the dismembered head one?
Yes.
Yeah, much easier to watch the dismembered head one. And that scene took too long, too. Okay, so we're getting to the end of the Cheshire Cat, and they have this little inset of his face, just supposed, it's supposed to communicate the fade out thing. I'm thinking the 1903 version had this technology, and they didn't do that much of it. They just took too long on his lines, and then had, oh my goodness, oh, it was so bad.
So after the Cheshire Cat scene is over, she goes on to the Mad Tea Party.
Jonathan may have been even more disturbed by the March hare than the White Rabbit.
The March hare was hideous. The nose.
He didn't really bother me. I was more bothered by the Dormouse, and especially by the Mad Hatter, who, if we had to vote for worst character in this film, he might just take first. He was maybe in his 50s?
I'd say older than 50s.
60s?
At least 60s, yes.
Retirement age. And he could have given this part a little bit of dignity, but
he did not.
No. The way he acted it out was incredibly obnoxious when he sang his song. It was like in falsetto / off key, like he was trying really hard to make it sound terrible, and he succeeded wonderfully well.
Most of the time when you think of the Mad Tea Party, you think of crazy in a fun way.
Yeah.
Like eccentric. This was crazy as in disturbingly off-balanced.
I was mostly disturbed by the Mad Hatter and just how incredibly obnoxious he was in this role. You were just ready for the scene to end and not to see him again.
The Dormouse he didn't have a whole lot of lines, so he wasn't horrible, but the costume was just weird.
It was weird.
You couldn't really see the eyes, so it looked like some sort of faceless hair alien.
Like, it was kind of hard to tell. They had these little round bits, and it's like, well, maybe those are his eyes, and it was strange. The tea party setup wasn't that bad. Like, the table, it looked like they had some nice china that maybe they borrowed from cast members. And they also did the thing of the teapot that wasn't there being there, and it was like they tried to explain the craziness of putting the Dormouse into the teapot by saying that because Alice left in a huff, or Alice left upset, that it was all the Dormouse's fault and they're going to stuff him in the teapot, which didn't need explanation. In other versions, it was just adorable, but whatever. Then she moves on to one of the better parts of the movie. Not her, because she was still terrible in this scene. But the caterpillar was actually pretty good.
His costume wasn't that great, but the actor was one of the only actors that I actually liked. He had a great voice. I liked the way he delivered his lines. He was fine. Why couldn't the others even be fine?
She still had her spacey, half-drunken way of delivering the lines, and they had these little insets for you, our old Father William, to try and depict the story, but they weren't fantastic, and they weren't necessary. They probably wasted money on that, but whatever. They had him crawl off, which was unnecessary, but he did try and do the caterpillar motions instead of just like, oh, I'm dragging myself off. He tried to act like a caterpillar.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for watching our review today, guys. Just to remind you, this was part 1 of our review of the 1931 version of Alice in Wonderland. Next week, we'll be back with part 2 to finish out our review. We'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Bye.
You know the tale of the girl who was sitting by the fire with her kitten. It's a story that was written long ago. You know that she was about to retire when the glass above the fire seemed to suddenly expire like the snow. You know when the way was cleared that she disappeared through the looking glass. You know that her name was Alice. So come along if you care, we'll take her